I don't know who this is for, but I know it's for someone. Because some of you have been questioning why you had to go through that kind of pain. Why you had to endure a relationship that broke you down, made you question your worth, and almost convinced you that love was punishment. But I came to tell you something today, and I need you to lean in because the truth is about to set you free. You weren't placed in a narcissist's life because you were weak. You weren't chosen because you were easy to manipulate. You were placed there because God trusted your resilience. God saw your light. And where there is light, darkness always tries to attach itself, but not to destroy you, to reveal you. From the moment you walked into that relationship, whether it was romantic, platonic, or even a family bond, you felt everything so deeply. You noticed the little shifts in tone, the silent pain behind the words, the need behind the anger. You saw someone broken, someone complicated, someone lashing out, and instead of running, your heart leaned in. That's who you are. You were wired for connection. You were created with a heart that listens to what people don't say, with a spirit that recognizes the storm before the thunder even rolls in. And because of that, you stayed. You gave grace. You gave chances. You extended mercy that most people would never offer. Not because you didn't know your worth, but because you believed in redemption. Because you've seen what love can do when it's given the chance to heal. But here's where it gets heavy. Narcissists are drawn to people like you, not because you're weak, but because your empathy gives them access to something they don't know how to create themselves. Authentic connection. They study your kindness. They mimic your softness. They perform a version of love they've never truly lived, hoping your compassion will keep them afloat. And it works. For a while, because your empathy begins to do what it always does. It sees the child inside the chaos. It sees the pain behind the performance. And you try to fix it. You try to heal it. You try to love it into becoming. But that's not your role. You weren't placed in their life to be their savior. You were placed there to awaken, to see your own patterns, to understand that empathy without boundaries is self-betrayal, to recognize that while your gift is sacred, it is not to be sacrificed. You see, God didn't give you that heart so it could be used, manipulated, and discarded. He gave it to you because this world needs healing, and healing doesn't come from force. It comes from presence. It comes from people who can sit in discomfort, who can offer love without agenda, who can speak truth in a way that breaks chains instead of spirits. And that's who you are. But even the most powerful gifts require discernment. Empathy without wisdom becomes a tool in the wrong hands. And you had to learn that, not in theory, but in real time. Through tears, through confusion, through the ache of wondering, why would God let me go through this? But here's the truth. He let you go through it because he knew it wouldn't break you, it would build you. He knew that on the other side of that pain was clarity, a deeper understanding of who you are, a sharper vision for your purpose, a fire in your belly that only betrayal can light. And he knew that if you ever truly discovered what your empathy was for, nothing would stop you. You see, it's not just about feeling for people, it's about seeing them, holding space, setting the atmosphere for healing, but never becoming the source. That's where the narcissists got it twisted. They tried to make you their mirror, their reflection, their validation, but you were never meant to reflect them. You were meant to reflect God, his grace, his boundaries, his justice, his mercy. There's something holy about people who care deeply, who show up even after being hurt, who choose softness over bitterness. But there's something holy too about people who say enough, who walk away when their spirit says this is no longer love, It's survival. And the moment you walked away, or even the moment you decided that you needed to, is the moment your empathy became fully aligned with your purpose. Because here's what the narcissist didn't count on. They didn't count on you healing. They didn't count on you learning. They didn't count on you waking up and seeing that your love was never the problem. It was the bait. And the moment you realized that, the whole dynamic shifted. The power you thought they had, it was never theirs. It was borrowed from your permission, from your willingness to carry what was never yours. And once you reclaimed it, they lost access not just to your presence, but to the light that was never meant to be dimmed. You are not weak. You are chosen. You are not naive. You are gifted. You are not broken. You are becoming. And your empathy, your ability to love, to see, to feel, that is not your burden. It is your calling. It's a hard truth to face, but one of the most powerful revelations you will ever receive. Because when you found yourself caught in that relationship, it didn't just feel like attraction. It felt like familiarity. It felt like recognition, like your soul had met someone who saw you, understood you, needed you. But what you didn't realize at first was that what they were reflecting back to you wasn't love. It wasn't affirmation. It was unhealed pain. It was every unresolved issue you tried to bury under performance, perfectionism, or people-pleasing. They didn't connect with your healed self. They latched onto your hidden brokenness. That's what makes narcissistic relationships so deceptive. They don't begin with cruelty. They begin with a spotlight, a mirror. They look at you and reflect back the parts of yourself you've been craving to be seen. They notice the little things. They listen not to understand, but to study. And when they start to repeat your dreams, mimic your faith, or align with your values, you start to believe you finally found someone who gets you. But it's not you they're connecting with. It's your wounds. It's the abandonment you haven't fully acknowledged. The childhood need to be chosen. The fear of being too much or not enough. And they learn to play that song so well, you start to dance to it without even realizing you've stepped into a trap. They saw your kindness, yes, but they also saw your insecurities. They recognized your loyalty, but they also sensed your fear of being left. And instead of honoring that, instead of loving you in a way that helped heal it, they used it. Because narcissists don't relate to people, they manipulate them. And the more you gave, the more they took. The more you explained yourself, the more they twisted your words. The more you loved them, the more they made you question if you were loving right. That's not connection. That's control. That's not intimacy. That's illusion. But let's be real. The part that hurts the most isn't just what they did to you. It's what you let happen. It's the way you silenced your voice to keep peace. It's the way you shrunk your light to make room for their shadow. It's the way you blamed yourself for the tension in the room, even when you were the one being mistreated. And you start to wonder, was I the problem? No, baby, you weren't the problem. But there was a problem, one that existed long before the narcissist entered your life. A gap in your soul, a place that still believed love had to be earned. That being chosen required struggle, that showing up meant self-abandonment. The narcissist didn't create that wound, they exposed it. And that is where the shift begins. Because once you understand that they weren't mirroring your worth, they were mirroring your wounds, you can stop taking their behavior as evidence of who you are. You can stop replaying every argument in your head trying to find the flaw in yourself. You can stop idolizing the version of them that showed up in the beginning, hoping that with enough patience or prayer, they'll return. That version wasn't real. It was a performance written by your deepest longing to be fully seen and unconditionally loved. But the truth is, if you don't know your worth, you will mistake attention for affection. You will confuse control for care. You will believe that being tolerated is the same as being treasured. Let's just say it. The narcissist didn't love you the way you deserved, not because you were unlovable, but because you were asking someone else to validate a value that was already within you. And when someone lacks the capacity to love in a healthy way, they will take advantage of anyone who doesn't fully believe they deserve better. Not because you're weak, but because you were wounded. And wounds don't just bleed, they attract. They attract lessons, they attract patterns, they attract moments that break you so deeply you're forced to choose, repeat, or heal. That's what this experience was, a divine interruption, a soul-level awakening, a mirror not just of who they were, but who you were still becoming. Because if the wound hadn't been there, their manipulation wouldn't have worked. If the insecurity hadn't been lingering, their tactics wouldn't have landed. If the belief that you had to earn love hadn't been present, you wouldn't have stayed when love became abuse in disguise. That's not a reason to blame yourself. It's a reason to heal yourself. Because now you see it. Now you know. And when you know better, you can choose better, not just in others, but in how you see yourself. You see, the narcissist was never capable of loving you at the level you deserve, not because you were too much, but because they were too empty. They wanted to drink from your well without ever digging their own. They wanted the benefit of your spirit without carrying the burden of their own healing. But that's not partnership, that's dependency. That's not love, that's survival. And you were never meant to survive your relationship. You were meant to thrive in them. But wait up, but you had to see it. You had to face the mirror. You had to stop asking, why did they treat me like that? And start asking, what part of me believed that was okay? That's not self-blame, it's self-ownership. That's how healing begins, when you stop giving them the pen and start writing a new story, one where your worth isn't up for negotiation, one where your wounds become wisdom, one where the mirror reflects your healing, not your hurt. Because here's the beauty of it. Once the wound is healed, the mirror loses its power. Once you stop bleeding, the reflection no longer sticks. You don't see them as the one who almost destroyed you. You see them as the one who helped you find the parts of yourself you were still hiding. You see the relationship not as a mistake, but as a message that says you were never broken, you were buried, and now it's time to rise. You didn't see it at first because warriors don't always recognize the battlefield they've stepped into, especially when the battle is dressed up like love. Especially when the war doesn't start with fists or shouting, but with confusion, with contradiction, with charm that slowly turned cold. You thought it was love. You thought it was destiny. You thought it was the kind of relationship that only needed patience and prayer to become what it was supposed to be. So you stayed. You gave. You compromised, you adjusted your voice, your needs, your spirit, and all the while, something in you kept saying, this isn't it, but you silenced that voice because warriors don't always come out swinging. Sometimes they try to save first, sometimes they try to fix what they didn't break, sometimes they choose peace, thinking it will bring healing, when what it actually does is hide the fact that there is a war going on. But let me tell you what God knew. He knew that beneath that soft heart was a fighter. He knew that under all that compassion was a woman or a man who, when they finally saw the truth, would never let themselves go back to the version of them that accepted survival as normal. He knew that the only way to call the warrior out of you was to allow you to be placed in a situation where your spirit would have to choose, shrink or rise, settle or stand up. Be consumed or be awakened. And God will never allow a battle unless he's already placed victory inside you. So while you were crying, while you were begging him to fix the relationship, while you were asking him why you had to hurt like this, he was whispering to your soul, I'm building you. I'm calling you. I'm activating something in you that comfort can't create. Because the truth is, you wouldn't have become who you are now if everything had gone your way. If they had treated you the way you hoped, you might have stayed. If they had given you just enough love to keep you quiet, you might have never realized you were starving. If they had been a little better, a little kinder, a little more consistent, you might have kept making excuses. But God didn't want you slightly free. He didn't want you emotionally limping through life calling it love. He wanted you whole. He wanted you strong. He wanted you alert. So he allowed the encounter not to destroy you, but to show you who you really are. Because warriors are not born in calm. They're birthed in chaos. They're not formed in comfort, they're forged in fire. And what you thought was your breaking point was actually your becoming point. You didn't even know how much power was in you until they tried to strip it away. You didn't realize how much courage was hiding in your soul until you had to look in the mirror and say, I deserve better than this. You didn't know your worth until someone tried to convince you you didn't have any. And that's how God works. He uses the very thing that wounded you to wake you up. He uses the very situation that shook your identity to anchor you in who he says you are. You weren't placed in that situation to fix the narcissist. You weren't called to carry their brokenness. You were there to confront your own, to see where you were still settling, to see where you were still believing lies about your value, to see where you were still waiting for permission to walk in power. And when everything crumbled, when you had to crawl out of confusion, when you had to face the fact that it wasn't going to change, you were also facing something else, your strength, your authority, your voice. That warrior in you that had been quiet for too long started standing up. That warrior in you started saying, I may have been fooled, but I will not be defeated. That warrior started reclaiming your time, your peace, your joy. Because the most dangerous version of you is the one who sees clearly. And now you see it. You see the manipulation. You see the patterns. You see how much you gave and how little you got in return. And you also see that you survived. You got out. Maybe not all at once, maybe not without pain, but you did. And you didn't just leave a relationship. You left a version of yourself that thought love meant losing yourself. You left a mindset that said your needs were too much. You left a habit of over-functioning to compensate for someone else's dysfunction. That's the warrior. The one who says, I will never go back to who I had to be in order to stay there. This is why it had to happen. Because you don't build spiritual muscles without resistance. You don't get discernment without deception. You don't learn to trust your intuition until you've ignored it enough times to know the cost. And sometimes God allows what he could have blocked because he's writing a bigger story. A story that includes not just healing, but authority, not just recovery, but revelation, not just survival, but legacy. You see, your warrior spirit isn't just for you. It's for the people watching you. It's for the next woman or man who thinks they can't leave. It's for the child growing up in a house where love is confused with control. It's for the friend who's afraid to speak up because they don't want to cause conflict. Your courage becomes their confirmation. Your breakthrough becomes their blueprint. And that's why God allowed it. Because the warrior in you doesn't just walk out, she or he leads others out too. So now, you walk different, you speak different, you love different. You've been through something that could have crushed you, and yet here you are, wiser, stronger, more grounded than ever before. That's not just healing, that's transformation. That's the fruit of a fight that was never about the other person. It was always about your becoming. Because God doesn't waste pain. He doesn't waste betrayal. He doesn't waste tears. He uses it all to train you, to elevate you, to awaken what's been dormant. And now that you're awake, now that the warrior in you has risen, there's no turning back. Yes. You thought it was about them. You thought maybe you were the answer to their brokenness, the light in their darkness, the calm in their chaos. You thought that if you just loved them hard enough, stayed long enough, forgave often enough, prayed consistently enough, they would change. that maybe you were the one God placed in their life to help them finally become who they were always meant to be. And that belief, rooted in goodness, drenched in compassion, became the thing that kept you in a place that was slowly draining the very life out of you. It wasn't because you were foolish, it was because you were faithful. Because you've always seen potential in people, because you know what transformation looks like, and you wanted that for them. You believed in their better. You hoped for their healing. You stayed when others would have left. And part of you even thought that was what God wanted from you. To endure, to intercede, to be the bridge between who they were and who they could become. But what if I told you that you misunderstood the assignment? That your presence in their life was never about saving them, but about finding yourself. That the entire experience, as painful and confusing and heartbreaking as it was divinely designed not to show you who they were, but to show you who you are. Because sometimes God allows us to walk into situations that feel like purpose, but are actually preparation. You weren't there to rescue them, you were there to wake up to you. Because the truth is, you had pieces of yourself still hidden. You had unspoken needs. You had dreams you'd quieted. You had wounds you hadn't yet acknowledged. And this relationship, this connection, pulled all of that to the surface. The way they neglected your needs revealed the parts of you that still questioned if your needs mattered. The way they controlled the narrative showed you where your voice had been silenced long before they entered the picture. The way they kept taking and taking while you kept giving showed you that you still equated love with sacrifice, even when that sacrifice cost you yourself. And God loved you too much to let you keep living like that. So he allowed this person to come into your life, not to be your partner in healing, but to act as a mirror. A mirror that exposed your patterns, a mirror that brought your beliefs about love, self-worth, boundaries, and value into the light. A mirror that, although painful to look into, became the catalyst for your awakening. Because the moment you realized that your love wasn't enough to fix them, you also started realizing that it was time to. You were sent there to remember your voice, to remember your dreams, to remember that peace is not something you beg for, it's something you choose. You were sent there to rediscover what it feels like to trust your intuition, to learn that when your spirit is unsettled, you don't silence it, you honor it. You were sent there to remember that being chosen by someone else means nothing if you've abandoned choosing yourself. And no, it didn't feel fair. It didn't feel holy. It didn't feel like purpose, but it was. Because transformation doesn't always begin with clarity. It begins with collision. And this was a collision. Between the version of you who was trying to earn love and the version of you who was born worthy of it. Between the child in you who wanted to be enough and the woman or man in you who finally decided to stop settling for almost. Between the you that needed to prove your value and the you that knows your value is not up for negotiation. You weren't sent to save them. You weren't called to be their fixer, their crutch, their emotional punching bag. That was never God's plan for you. You were sent to discover just how powerful you are when you stop handing your identity to people who are too broken to hold it. You were sent to find the courage to walk away, not because you hate them, but because you finally love yourself enough to stop bleeding for someone who won't even admit they're hurting. You were sent to reclaim your boundaries, to rebuild your voice, to reintroduce yourself. Because before this, maybe you didn't know how strong you were. Before this, maybe you didn't know how much you were caring. Before this, maybe you thought that love had to hurt, that relationships had to cost you something precious in order to be real. But now you know better. Now you've seen the truth. Now you've stood in the ashes of something that was supposed to be sacred and realized that sacred doesn't mean staying silent. That holy doesn't mean unhealthy. That commitment doesn't mean captivity. And even though it broke you, it also built you, it taught you, it stretched you, it grew you, it sent you back to God, back to your soul, back to the parts of yourself you hadn't visited in years. And in that space, after the fallout, after the disappointment, after the tears, you found clarity. You found resilience. You found the you that doesn't explain your worth. The you that doesn't explain your worth. The you that knows peace is your standard, not your reward. This was never about saving them. That was never your cross to carry. That was never your battle to fight. You can love someone and still walk away. You can believe in their potential and still protect your peace. You can hope for their healing without sacrificing your own. You were never supposed to burn yourself out trying to light their path. You were supposed to walk your own path, and in doing so, discover that everything you thought you needed from them was already living inside of you. People thought they were the reason for the season, but they were the classroom. And the real lesson was you, the strength of your spirit, the beauty of your heart, the unshakable value that no manipulation could destroy. You weren't sent to save them. You were sent to discover that you never needed saving in the first place. You just needed remembering.